Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM Roundtable for August 2022. This is a chance for patrons and I to get together to discuss topics in tabletop RPGs, and by sharing our ideas, thoughts, and experiences, we can all become better DMs or GMs. DM Roundtable discussions are open to all patrons at every level of patreon.com/roguewatson. You don't even have to be an active participant. You can jump in here and lurk to your heart's content, and we are glad to have you. This month's topic, as determined by the Patreon poll, is virtual tabletop, better known as VTT. How often do we play tabletop RPGs, such as D&D, on a VTT versus in person? How does it affect our prep work, our gameplay, and the experience of playing with others? Joining me for this month's DM Roundtable, we have Brandon.
Hello.
Christopher.
Hello.
Dory.
Hello.
Genocider.
Oh.
Lumpy.
Hey, everybody.
Lucas.
Hello.
Pegleg Smitty.
Howdy.
And Stan.
Greetings.
Full house. I appreciate y'all. So, when it comes to this topic, obviously I favor the virtual tabletop. I don't know how much of a story I want to get into about how it came to be. I don't have a lot of experience with physical D&D growing up. It was always more video games and card games. Magic the Gathering was a thing when I was a kid. So I just didn't. And a couple times in high school, I played some D&D. A friend of a friend's, they had an anime store in our hometown that we played in the back of, which was extremely nerdy. This would have been second edition back when third, I think, had just come out. And it was fine. We had a decent time. We had some laughs and things. And then it never really caught on. And then occasionally we'd go to that friend's house and play D&D. It was like the will of Stranger Things. Like, guys, I just want to play D&D. And a lot of us were just wanting to do, LAN parties or bringing computers over there. So I didn't have a lot of experience playing physical D&D. And then, I'm still good friends with a lot of my friends as we're going to off to college and off to our lives, and we're using video games to stay in touch with each other, playing games online, because when we went to college, suddenly the internet was a bigger thing and we didn't have to do dial-up anymore. So fast forward to a couple years later, and another friend gets us into playing online, introducing us to Roll20. This would have been 2014, I think, when Roll20 was brand new. And we actually played Pathfinder at first. And actually, he was doing working for this other, I think, streaming group. And that was a fun experience. We ended up actually, I think, doing some streams of it too. This would have been really early days of doing that. And then that friend dropped off. And a year later, I got together with the others and said, I think I could do this. I'm going to try to DM, but I want to do Shadowrun. And then that was the beginning of it. And then eventually we did transition to D&D because 5th edition was pretty new, and we ended up really enjoying that. I didn't mean to go into my whole life story about it, but the point is I really enjoyed doing the virtual tabletop. I think Roll20 really opened things up. It's a relatively easy user experience. It's free. It's browser-based, which is incredibly easy to have, very little barrier to entry, which I think is very important. And the whole, we're going to record and put it on the channel was really due to that one friend, because he was doing it. And I was like, well, shoot, I guess I could just do this, even though our quality wasn't that good. And, we didn't know what we were doing, but we just kind of built it up from there. And I just kept doing it and kept enjoying it. And it was just a good excuse and it's still a good excuse to get together with a lot of friends that I would not normally see or hang out with, and we get to do that on a weekly basis. So that is me professing my love for online virtual tabletop and why it means a lot to me, and really has ended up growing into this non-nostalgic love of the tabletop experience, tabletop RPGs, because I really don't have much of that compared to, I think, a lot of you that do. All right, that's enough of me. Brandon, tell me about your experience with virtual tabletop.
I'm a lot like you. I didn't have any experience playing when I was younger. I'm 40 now. I've been playing maybe since 18. I was looking back through my emails actually to see when I signed up for Roll20. And it was around like 16 when my brother-in-law gave me a player's handbook as a birthday present. Knew that I was always into like the fantasy trope and had liked the idea. And whenever we'd play board games, I would be trying to get in the character of the person I was playing in the board game. And he was like, "Man, you would love Dungeons and Dragons." So I started messing around with it a little bit with him in person. And then as time went by, they ended up moving away to Seattle. We live in Tennessee. So we had started to try to find a way to play. And around the same time as when Roll20 started to get more and more popular, I think, too. Um, so that's been the majority of my experience. We've had weekly games since probably 2018, 2019.
Nice.
Outside of a handful of, just circumstances that are either holidays or something related. But it's been a great way. I've met people that I consider good friends that we talk weekly through D&D as a result of playing on Roll20 with them. And it's been one where I think, and we can probably get into the topic later, but like Roll20 has a lot of great features that you mentioned. There's a small onboard that once you get the basics down, especially from the DM side, because as a player, it's fairly simple. You can figure out how to click things pretty easily. The DM, there's nuances that can help make the game better for everybody, including just quality of life things. But there's other tabletops that I've definitely been interested in looking at. Foundry's a big one. There's I'll have to look it back up.
That's the new one, right? The Foundry.
Jump in later. Well, Foundry's one of the new ones that's like you buy one time and everybody connects to you. You are the server at that point instead of it being on someone else's servers. There's pros and cons to that, and from what I understand. But then there's like new fancy ones like Tailspire, I think is one of the ones that look real pretty. And as fun as Roll20 is, it'd be great to have something pretty, but once you start to get pretty involved, now you're starting to ask for better computing power from other people. And I think that's one of the awesome things about D&D is that you don't need a whole lot of stuff to play the game. So it's been fun, and the virtual tabletops really made it to where, I mean, this is a big part of my life now. I run an in-person game for work. I've been doing it for 2 years, and the difference is pretty strong. But in general, they have their own pros and cons, and I guess that's where I'd leave it.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into the differences. Christopher, give me your experiences with the virtual tabletop.
Sure. So the most recent experience for me is I got the starter kit to get back into it. Lost Finds and Found Ever, and I started with I was trying to bring my nephews and my kids together to play it. This is when mid-pandemic or whatever, and we were going through. I ran the first couple with hand-drawn maps, and then somebody mentioned about Roll20, so then I fired that up, and then the next 2 or 3 sessions we were doing Roll20, and I was moving the players around. Everybody was around the table. We had a single TV where we were showing Roll20. I had my brother log in as a player, and I was controlling the rest. But with the lighting and things like that, the kids were, more used to that style, rather than minis and things like that. So they could see it better, I guess. And it seemed to be a better experience. And then when we got to the end, I went ahead and went to my local shop, got all the minis, 3D printed the ones that I didn't have, and went ahead and played on the map. And they were kind of like, I wish we would have done that on the TV. We should put it up on a projector or done both at the same time. And it was weird to say like, no, this is probably how it should be, with the maps and the minis, rather than do the Roll20. At the same time, I'm running that game in person. I've started to get more online games and participate there with friends that we would never be able to bring together. They're all over the country, and and we would have never been able to get together without something like Roll20. And it's been a great experience. Other than we were using Zoom, instead of the Roll20 audio, but all of that's perfect. And we're all on Teams calls and Zoom all day long anyway, so it's kind of second nature at this point. Um, and I'm already, tech savvy, so the controls inside of Roll20 all kind of just made sense. And making the APIs when changes to the APIs to make it do what I want was simple. So there's a lot of tools there, and I don't know, other than because it's really flashy, you can see the art. There's a lot of great art out there, and it's hard to compete with that when you're trying to do theater of the mind. And especially with younger kids, because two of them are under 10, it was a little bit difficult to describe something they haven't seen without saying, discussing, Lord of the Rings, or you know what, why don't we go watch Lord of the Rings so that I can reference some of that content.
Yeah.
It seems funny, but it's like weird, right? So, but now they're super into Lord of the Rings and they're reading the books, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's kind of my take on VTT. I'm a fan just because of so much it enables.
I agree. Dory, what are your experiences with the virtual tabletop?
Well, I definitely started in person with my husband and I just doing like a 2-man crew at home. Sadly, most of our friends are not into D&D, unfortunately.
You need
And
to try harder.
we've tried. We I really liked the in-person aspect of it. We used some virtual map building things. I believe Arc and Forge was the tool that Corey used to build the maps, and we would use a TV. So it was kind of a hybrid system. It was in person because we were in the same room, but we were using an electronic tabletop to maintain the maps and move the minis and things like that. And then we decided to try looking for a virtual table. And we had a few experiences that were not great. And then we joined a campaign that was pretty long. Now, when we do online, we do not do video. All of our experiences, aside from the one shots that I've done with you, have been just voice only on Discord.
Interesting.
And then, of course, I have the table that I DM for at school with my students.
Is the voice only? Is that by design or like a preference thing, or just the way it's laid out?
It's just the tables that we've joined. We've asked about video, but they haven't really seemed very keen on it. Now, also keep in mind the tables we joined, we were not friends with.
Yeah.
We, just random people we met online. So I can understand maybe not feeling comfortable in putting yourself on video, but one of the things that I was looking to talk about tonight was just the visual cues that you get, whether it be on video or being in person in the same room. And I'm sure many of us probably share the same sentiment.
I was going to ask, how does that affect, the gameplay experience, not having the video, not being able to see other players?
It's a little bit of a struggle. Yeah. It's a struggle at times, especially because it's really hard to know where the character ends and the player begins and vice versa. And I think if you're able to see their facial expressions and their body language, it would be far easier to discern that. But one of the other things that I specifically thought about in terms of, VTT versus in person was kickstarting a group of novices like my high schoolers. I could never envision doing something like that strictly online. I use Roll20 to build everything, and I use Roll20 to control it while I'm at the table with them. But just them being there together, helping each other, understanding the concepts. I really think that there's a strong benefit in being in the same room with each other, at least in that particular instance.
I don't think I disagree with you on that. Do you think that's benefit for younger folks to be able to have the social experience that's maybe away from the screen? Although nowadays, I don't even know how to relate to growing up in an online world. Like, I guess it's Gen Z would be high school now. I don't even know on how that would
I
affect.
think, I taught them how to build their characters in D&D Beyond and Roll20, and we have books at the table, which is nice. I mean, my one set of books that I take to school. And then I have them have the app open on their phones. So there is still a technology piece to it, but I really focus heavily more on them trying to get into character and actually role playing and bouncing off of each other at the table. And I just know as an adult who's played and I'm experienced with D&D, it's still a struggle for me not being able to see people. It's that awkward pause that you're not really sure when to jump in, and then 3 people jump in at the same time. So it's much easier at a table, I think, to play off of each other.
That's a good point. Jenna Cider, do you have any experiences with virtual tabletop versus the physical tabletop?
Yep. So I grew up playing all in-person Theater of the Mind games with my family and friends. I moved away. Like, my brothers live in Texas now, and I live in Hawaii, so we can't do that anymore. So they invited me to join their Roll20 game, and that was the first time I tried it, maybe like a year ago. And the second experience was playing in your game.
Oh, wow.
So I really like it. It's easy. I love not having to have like a ton of maps and minis, or worrying about having enough minis or the right minis. I just really love it. I didn't like it at first, but now I'm a big fan.
I was going to say, yeah, as somebody who transitioned into the virtual space, what was maybe your biggest hang up or something you didn't like and maybe something you did like?
I think I started off just kind of like it felt like a little too tactical and less like a role-playing game, I think, at first.
This is the classic hammer and nail problem where I've talked about this in my crafting streams, but if you show your players a battle map, they're going to start thinking about battles. And sometimes you might want to not show them the battle map yet if you can help it.
And like art becomes part of the canon. Like they see something on the map, they're like, "Oh, can I?" Yeah,
that's true. That is something I've had to be very. And my players will catch me on that a lot of times. I'll just put a map down, and usually it's Raymond will be like, "Oh, what is this? Can I interact with this?" And I'm like, I guess it's just part of the map art. I didn't think about it.
Yeah. So I think when we played Theater of the Mind, one time we used like a Scrabble board and like the little Scrabble pieces. Those are our minis.
Yeah. I think I would, and I'm the opposite. I might, even though I think I've always had a pretty good imagination and enjoying fantasy and sci-fi and everything, but I think I might actually struggle to play with a straight up Theater of the Mind or a very heavily abstracted version of the game just because I'm so used to having all these visual aids.
Although, right now, also.
Yeah.
I'm really hooked on the VTT.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's something we'll transition into, but I'm also flustered when I don't have all my buttons I can push. Lumpy, tell me about your experiences with the virtual tabletop.
I started playing D&D back in the 80s with AD&D, in fact, and I did that a while when I was like younger, and then I eventually moved, and all my new friends in my new home didn't play D&D, so I didn't really have a gaming group anymore. And so for a few years, basically, I didn't really play D&D, and then I went away to college for a while, and I got a couple games together in college here and there, but we were also college students that were working all the time, so we didn't really get that much of a chance to play. It really wasn't until COVID hit that that I actually got a chance to finally play with a bunch of my friends through the virtual tabletop. We started playing on Roll20 pretty much right after the pandemic hit, and we've been playing ever since. I still have the same game going with one of my groups, in fact, and they've gone from level 1, now they're up to level 13, I think. And yeah, they're just doing great. But it gave me also a great chance to reconnect with these friends that live all over the place. I have a friend in New York, one in Florida, a bunch in Michigan, and a few out here in California. So
My
it gives
goodness.
us a great chance to be together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I really like them.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing I have to say about it is that without being able to play that online, and I mean we could play video games online, but I also feel like I don't know, I'm getting older and video games don't hold that, and goodness knows a lot of the online games tend to require more dexterity and rapid fire response time and mine is not getting any better. I've got really funny stories about me and Chris and Raymond trying to play Apex Legends when that game came out, because we thought, oh, this is a fun little game and we can, you try to live as long as you can, and holy shit, we were like, it was like a movie of like 3 old people like, in a paintball arena just getting murdered instantly. Like every single game, it was an embarrassment. We're like, all right, well, this was not going to happen anymore. But with playing D&D, it just works out for all of us to play, and we all enjoy the game, and it's something that we would not normally be able to do on the regular at all. So that's obviously close to my heart. Lucas, tell me about virtual tabletop.
Well, I started doing virtual tabletop. I mean, aside from like one brief one-shot stint that didn't continue, I basically started about 2 or 3 years ago now. I started with one campaign with some friends online, and that kind of fizzled. It went for a while, but now I still have a long-running campaign with some friends, and I primarily use Roll20, and I haven't done an in-person game for a while because of the world affairs. But I feel kind of bad for how much I like Roll20 and VTT instead of just in person, because I got really into minis. Like, I don't use minis for everything. I don't use custom terrain because I think there's a fine line between having some props and characters and some representations and going full-blown diorama. But I kind of do a blend of theater of the mind and having I think you at least need minis for your characters. But that actually makes virtual tabletops very convenient because people actually, I have some friends who can draw their avatars, their little button. That's nice.
That is nice.
And also getting a mini. If I need a mini on the fly, I just do a snapshot of a screen cap of something from the monster manual, really, or just I make my own tokens. It's easy. It's so easy.
Yeah.
And I found it's just actually almost. It's just it is very easy to do. It takes a bit of prep work because you got to get stuff together, but I avoid having everything be too tactical because you can go overboard with having a custom map for every room, but I just leave it fairly abstract. Like, oh, you're in the city, and here's the big city map. Mm-hmm. And if they break out into a fight in the city, then it's not to scale, but you're in a fight now. And they just go by the squares.
Okay.
But
I was gonna say that's something I run into with playing on Roll20, as I feel like it's a different method of prepping because I do feel like every situation that can be a battle needs to have a battle map, and I think I've kind of forgotten maybe what I even used to do was I didn't necessarily used to do that all the time, which is what you're speaking to, is not necessarily having to insert that map, and it gets to be a level of over prep and a level of railroading the players a little too much, because then you're just completely unprepared for if they start something that you're not prepared for, and you're like, oh, I don't have a map for this, so no, I gotta shut this down.
That's also why the abstraction kind of helps, like by setting a precedent that you're never that specific most of the time. It's cool to just have they were in Neverwinter for a big section of the story or the campaign. and I just have the main Neverwinter map, which is just a big city map. And sometimes they went to specific buildings like the castle or whatever, or the sewers. But generally, if they're in the city, that's just there's a big city map. It's not to scale. Their icons are almost as big as a house.
Yeah.
But whatever. Fortunately, there are squares, and the grid system is very convenient and reliable. So they just have a fight, just measure out the distance, blah blah blah.
I do like that a lot of the city maps in Roll20. They actually do an effort to scale them. So with the measuring tool, you can kind of see like whether it's feet or even miles or something if it's a big overland map. So I always thought that was a neat feature.
One virtual tabletop, which is not a virtual tabletop, but I've tried to make this work, and I do it on occasion. I've convinced my group to let me to indulge me once or twice. Is Zoom, because what I do is I was like, sometimes I'm like, hey guys, want to mix it up this week, and I have minis. And I'll just get my webcam and play and arrange a map on my bedroom floor, and just hover. It's really silly, but it's a hassle. It's a pain in the rear. But I mean,
you want to play with the toys sometimes.
Yeah, I do want to play with the toys and have a map, and it is a pain in the ass. And I try to justify it by doing it once in a while for like important parts.
Yeah. All right. Peg Leg Smitty, tell me about virtual tabletop experience.
I got started with Roll20 in early 2014. Actually, not with Dungeons and Dragons, with Dungeon World and Apocalypse World. Didn't start playing D&D until a bit later when my brother did a homebrew campaign. 95% of my DM experience has been in VTT, including when we met up in person. We all just bust out laptops, so we rolled physical dice. But I don't know, Roll20 and other VTTs, just for the maps, the tools, the easily accessible character sheet, the art hands out. I really struggle to step away from that. Obviously, rolling dice in person it's great. Like, that's half the reason why I've got so many, but I don't know. It's hard to step away from the VTT. It's just so easy from an organizational tool.
That I will say that. I think rolling physical dice is still a hell of a lot of fun, and there's no good way to replicate that digitally. But everything else I could take digitally. So I like that combination of literally, even though it probably feels stupid and weird to other people, to literally show up with a laptop and play. If I could do that as a kid, as a teenager, like showed up with, which it would have been it would have been giant, freaking CRT monitors and everything. If I could have, if we all could have done that and played and known that was a thing, back then, and I probably would have played a hell of a lot more D&D and maybe other RPGs.
Yeah, I'm a player in a game that we haven't played in a little while, just 'cause scheduling, where that's in person, and they do the he'll do a quick sketch of the map and kind of update it at every round. And he's also very generous when it comes to yeah, that's probably in fireball range. But I don't know, it's when I'm DMing, I maybe it's a crutch, but I just love the VTT. I think if I were to play in person, I'd probably want either a laptop, or I know people build those the table with the TV in there, and then you just set your minis right on the map. Those are really cool.
That is cool. Yeah, I think that's what I think Dory was saying about. I think a couple people have mentioned doing like a hybrid system, and I guess yours is too. I mean, if you're using a virtual tabletop system but still there in person, that seems like a really cool combination. You're getting like the best of both experiences.
Yeah, you do lose some of that. Almost like, when you get together with your buddies and you do like a board game night, you have like that socialization aspect that you lose a little bit out on, especially since like Dory, we don't play with webcams just because not everybody has them. But it's also, up until recently, my closest player in my online campaign was, I think, about 90 miles away, and one of them we don't play together anymore, but they lived in Portugal. So if we were playing in person, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, that exactly. The long range distance, you can't beat the advantage there.
Yeah.
All right, Stan, you've waited patiently. Tell me about your virtual tabletop experience.
They made me do it. So yeah, I mean, Eric, you're familiar with my story. I mean, I was dungeon mastering back in '82 when the Red Box came out. So I'm the guy that's got the custom gaming table, the minis. I use Pathfinder pawns, but you know, I've got a gridded mat built into my table, and I love playing around the table where, like some of the stuff Dory was saying, I can read the room, pull in people that I can see they're kind of checking out a little bit, and you can throw something their way, you know. And to me, that's the fun part of DMing, is being able to read the room, see what emotions you're evoking from different players, even better than you can with webcams and stuff. Then COVID happened, and my wife was sick at the same time. So to support the DM, my players made themselves available, and we started playing over Zoom. And then we started, Dungeon of the Mad Mage came out, and you try to run that, and you look at the size of that map, and I mean, I printed out the map for Forge of Fury, and that covered my entire dining room table, and we played on my dining room table. But you can't. Dungeon of the Mad Mage is the size of my living room. If you try to print it out, it's insane. It's like I can't even do that, and I'm crazy. So that forced me to get into a Roll20 account. Now there are other tools, branching off, like D&D Beyond. Love it. Especially if you're an advanced level caster, you need something like that to manage spells.
We made it all the way down to you before somebody mentioned D&D Beyond. Holy crap!
Yeah. The plugins and stuff for D&D Beyond, absolutely fantastic. Love it. It's a great tool for onboarding new players. Wonderful for a graybeard DM like me. I'm looking at Roll20. I'm going, hey, Chris, Dory, do you guys do like remedial lessons? Because
you did just fine.
Well, that's as a player.
Yeah.
It's something different, setting it up to where
true.
moving tokens around and the can dynamic lighting. That's fine, but trying to do anything else, that's not the easiest thing to pick up. When, like I said, I can do theater of the mind, I can do minis, whatnot, around a table. This is it's a learning curve for me.
Yeah. And
I am a player in a buddy's game where we don't use webcams, and I'm a player in that game because I like my buddy. It's hard to play without seeing people. It's really hard when that's one of the things that you really enjoy about the game.
Yeah, a couple of you have mentioned that about the audio only, and I mean, out of the gate, we always had webcams. Now, they weren't always great quality, and those of you that have watched some of my older stuff can testify to that, and same with the audio as well. But we definitely always had that. That was always going to be part of it. So I'm kind of astonished that folks, I mean, shit, webcams aren't that expensive. Like, I would just really pressure people at some point. I'd be like, look, we're going to do this. Like, I want to be able to see you, like, and it doesn't have to be a good one.
I forgot to mention, in all my games that I've been running, and the game I've been running for a while now, my friends just are shy and they don't want to have webcams. And well, what am I going to do? Just have my webcam on? And it's just like, it's worth playing. I don't regret playing, but it's just like, I wish that would be really nice. It must be nice to have webcam games least, as opposed to.
Would you hang out with these friends normally? Like, if I get being shy. I'm definitely an introvert, but if you're there with friends, I feel like it's a fairly intimate setting. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm.
It's their preferences. I totally understand, but I mean, I can't make that choice for them.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we chat all the time, but it's just whatever. But also, that's kind of why I miss the minis, the table, the event, because on the one hand, it's very convenient because my game's in 10 minutes. I'll be home. I'm driving home. I'll be home in 5 minutes. I'll boot up my computer and log in, as opposed to they're all convening at the house. Some people got here early. The event, but that's also a double-edged sword because it's hard to coordinate and organize.
Yeah, go ahead, Jenna.
Like, you mean I got to put on pants?
Yeah. I'm never wearing pants. I don't know. It's always pants optional.
I I was going to say, as we're having an audio-only session.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Honestly, we probably should transition to doing webcams. I need to just. I haven't done it because I don't have a setup to record that, but it wouldn't be a big deal. I could just do a single monitor capture, and we can look like the Brady Bunch. All, I just lazy. I never created a overlay to properly do that, and plus, not knowing ever how many people there were, it would just be a real challenge. And I'm just talking about this because of the fact that I record this and put this on YouTube. By the way, obviously, if I was just chatting with folks, then yeah, we'd definitely be using webcams, but. I should find a way to look into that because I do think it would improve the experience, and then you have that awkwardness of like, oh crap, am I about to talk over somebody? There was one person who couldn't make it, I believe, because they are based in the UK, Refus, and I wanted to read their comment because I thought that'd be kind of nice. Says, a fan of both virtual tabletop and physical, especially the pre-built campaigns are amazing time savers and great for switching off, as most things are calculated with a click and give a very video game feel in dungeon crawls. I'm also a fan of making maps, so virtual tabletop fills that love nicely. That's something we haven't talked about. In-person D&D, for me, feels more social with your friends gathered around the table. Snacks can be laid out, and you can readily switch between theater of the mind or maps and minis. In some ways, it's more freeing and forgiving as you can roleplay stuff and locations. I know you can totally go theater of the mind on VTT, but I feel pressured to have maps for everything. I just mentioned that earlier. There's also little social cues in person, such as two players sharing a knowing look. So basically saying a lot of what we just kind of were talking about in terms of the differences. One thing they did mention, though, that was Refus, by the way, patron, was does anybody make maps? Like, has anybody discovered a joy of making maps in Roll20 that maybe they wouldn't normally do that in the physical, or vice versa? Do you like to sketch maps out physically, and then on virtual you're like, I can't do this? This is just opening the floor to anybody.
I started doing my own maps and doing my own homebrew stuff, and even when we were doing that Horde of the Dragon campaign, and I did the Dreaded Chapter 4, I rewrote. I made my own art and did that by hand, but trying to do that on a VTT or whatnot, I have not found that skill yet.
I am so I currently got the new starter set, the Stormwreck Isle, Dragons of the Stormwreck Isle, and it's a Target exclusive, so they can only buy the physical thing, which means it's not on Roll20 until October. But I wanted to start it in August because the kids are still out of school and that hasn't ramped up yet. So I am painfully porting all of that into a separate Roll20 thing where I am basically snapped a picture with my phone, uploaded it, aligned it to grid, did all that kind of stuff. And for the monsters that aren't in the monster manual or whatever, creating those NPCs and going through and creating, all these different NPCs from the, stat blocks that are in the table. I am upset that all the art is from like the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. And they even had some minis. Oh yeah, and I got the mini set from a local game store, which has like Eric the Cavalier and Presto the Magician. But these aren't the stat blocks that are in the pre-gen characters. So sad. I think they had a great opportunity and just didn't pull it off. But going through that process, I'm making some of the maps myself. So I've Googled. Actually, I Googled through your Discord for like map making. I saw some posts from a while back where people have tried different things. I've made some. I don't know that they were. I wouldn't call them great. They will do.
Good enough.
But yeah, absolutely good enough. And I'm now watching your Tomb of Annihilation. Something I noticed that you do is you prep the situation with a lot of theater of mind, like get to like where people are, and then you arrange the tokens, and then you drag the players to that map. Where previously what I was doing was as soon as we would change, I would instantly change the map, and I realized that they're watching the TV and not truly listening to me set it up. And I think I would have their attention more if I described it more and then then switched the players to the map in Roll20. So I think I'm going to try to incorporate that a little bit more, but yeah.
That is something I've learned, and I mentioned that too, is trying to wait before showing the map, trying to get as much of that theater of the mind, that description, let players get as far up until maybe even roll initiative to where you can show a map, if assuming you're not already in the middle of a dungeon or something. And because your players will be a little more exploratory, a little more investigative, instead of looking at the map realizing like, okay, now I'm glued to the map and using this art assets and maybe not paying attention as much to the kind of surroundings and the questions I should be asking.
With certain exceptions, mostly towards the beginning of using Roll20, I was like, okay, I'll make a dungeon by dragging and dropping walls one by one and basically customizing all the pieces to Lego them together. But like eventually I was just like, it got really liberating because I just took existing dungeon maps and recontextualized them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, cavern system, I'll just add monsters and traps. Or, oh, dungeon for this, but I'll just redo it to my specs or my monsters and traps and whatever I feel. And then mix and match floors. And it was just liberating because I've never been very good at like drawing corridors and walls and secret rooms. I do that sometimes, but it's just easier, and I could focus more on what I really like than drawing walls and trying to draw plausible maps.
Yeah, a big reason I switched to D&D from Shadowrun is because there was a lot more art assets for D&D than there was for Shadowrun. I was having to custom build all the damn maps that I was using and driving myself crazy doing that. And then all of a sudden with D&D, I had so many gorgeous, great fantasy maps to choose from. Or what they have now is when you buy a dungeon pack, they give you like set configurations of those, like a cave, and then they'll also give you the individual, like a Lego set or something, like an individual pieces of tiles that you can then connect together to really custom make your own dungeon. And those are awesome, and you can really go crazy with the marketplace that's on there. I'm not trying to shill for Roll20 necessarily, although I've been working with them for years and years now. But I have been pretty impressed with the people that create all these art assets and then put them on there, and then it makes it very easy to integrate that and throw that in there. And you can just get them a la carte as you need them. And it's one of those things where once you buy it once, you can then use it forever for any game. And there are times where I've used one dungeon and then you flip it horizontally and you turn it another direction and then you cut off a few areas with dynamic lighting and boom, you've got another dungeon there. So you can kind of go ahead.
More than once, I had, before my other group ended, now I'm just down to one, but when I was running two simultaneously, I'd say like, okay, I used this map for a dungeon way back then with my first group, but my second group hasn't seen this map, so it's gonna recycling time. Why not?
Yeah, you're gonna do that work to put all that together. I remember too when I first started, they didn't have any of the purchased campaign modules. Back in my day, I had to buy the. I don't remember if I did this with Fandelver, but I know I did it with Princess of the Apocalypse. I had to buy the maps from the artist because he sold them on his website, and then I had to upload them to Roll20. And I think because Roll20 had the limit because they were so high resolution, I had to even cut them up into pieces as if I were printing them out for a physical table. Cut them up into pieces and then upload them in chunks and then line them up, and it got to be a nightmare in some cases. So now I just think I'm overjoyed now that they started doing these. Hey, you can just buy the campaign book and you're ready to go. You just jump in there and there's all your maps, all your tokens, all your dynamic lighting is set up. And for me, for someone that had to do all of that manually for I know for Fandelver and Princes, I had to do that completely manually. That was mind-blowing. Now, there are still some issues to be found in there, like maybe the default tokens aren't set up like I want them to, or some of the dynamic lighting is a little wonky, but it is way less work to do that. But the cool thing is, you don't have to buy a damn thing on there either. You could technically do all that work yourself. It's not like it's locked up and like, hey, if you want to run, Tomb of Annihilation, you have to buy the Tomb of Annihilation campaign. That's not the case. It's the classic capitalist, like, do you have more money or do you have more time? You get to make that choice.
Can I say something before I go? I have to get going in like 5 minutes. First off, it's been very convenient for me because I honestly have more money than time off, which isn't to say I'm super rich, but like I'd rather say, screw it, I'm going to toss $5 to the marketplace for this map pack or that map pack because I want to support them too, and I like the custom map packs. But also, before I go, I want to pose this question. What does everyone think of all the bells and whistles and dynamic lighting and super dynamic lighting and all the extra features that they try to sell on things like Foundry? Because it just kind of baffles me, because for TTRPGs, it's not like video games. Like, how much do you need to play a TTRPG?
That's a good question. I can answer first, but we don't even play around with a lot of this stuff. I feel like we've been playing so long that it took me years before I think I even started using macros. And it was probably only for the grace of people on YouTube comments going, Eric, why the fuck aren't you using like so-and-so thing? And I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, I was just such a dumbass about not digging into the features of it.
See, I'm kind of, sorry. I was going to say, I'm kind of the opposite way. I really like meddling with all the bells and whistles and everything. I like using different aspects of the dynamic lighting to give kind of ambiance for all my players. Like, I'm constantly changing the colors of the light. Each of the players that have dark vision, they have a different color of their dark vision whenever they're like, I do things with like that. I also like to use things like there's the little token tip or the tool tip thing on any of the tokens that you make. And I like using that to kind of hide messages to my players too. They're like, oh, what's this? All of a sudden their cursor is over a part of the map and they're like, what's this little note right here? And what does it mean? And the little things like that, I think, is really great for storytelling.
Like a point-and-click adventure game or something at that point?
Yeah, like I've done several things where, like, I did this one layout on a landing screen where I put all these basically photographs down on the landing screen all over the place. And one of them was actually movable by one of my players. By my players, I made them, one of them was like controllable by all the players, and someone finally noticed it and they moved it and they found a hidden note underneath them. Things like that just like can add this other dimension to the storytelling that I just love to do.
I finally had fun with that. Those of you that are watching our Rhyme campaign, I designed an entire puzzle that was literally like an old school adventure game that was all interactive, and it was they were looking at a desk. And they didn't realize it at the time, but the pieces, the art assets I put on the desk itself were all controlled by them. And there were like little things underneath it to where once they started moving things, they were like, wait a minute, and I tried to literally design it. I went full game designer mode. I was like, all right, I got to like a little bit peeking out. So they start to get curious and figure it out. And the moment where they start realizing that they can just like move shit around was really cool and fun for me. Because it was like, I don't know, watching monkeys use tools the first time, just the way I can sit back and grin ear to ear and watch them unfold this very interactive puzzle. Now, that's not saying you can't do something like that in a physical context. You would have to hide it very carefully, I guess, and then reveal it at some point. But I think that was the first time I'd really done a straight up puzzle thing like that in the virtual tabletop. And I had a lot of fun with that. And that was really, I didn't have to do any programming for that. It was pretty simple, just throwing art stuff on there and then hiding it between different layers and then making sure things were controlled by certain players.
That's something else I've always enjoyed doing, bringing in props and stuff too. So it's actually, you get you find a healing potion in my game, I'll hand you a healing potion.
Oh, that's cute.
I have vials that are preloaded with red D4s. So here you go, and it's like, you don't have to worry. What's the formula for this? Is it is it greater, superior? That's how many dice are in the potion.
That's really smart. 'Cause we're always forgetting that too. I like that idea.
That kind of reminds me of one of my players. He found a bunch of hag magic potions in this one dungeon I made, and he refused to identify them. So I gave him these cards that just had the name of like the description of the potion and potion number 1, potion number 3, or whatever. And whenever he wants to use one, he just kind of plays that card. And he has had those things for about 20 sessions at this point. Still has not identified them.
Brandon, what you want to say something earlier?
Oh, just like when going back to like making maps and using maps, I think between adding the assets within the Roll20 marketplace, I'm pretty sure you and Chris have talked before. Gabriel Picard makes like really interesting map packs.
Yeah.
That his artwork is similar throughout all of his stuff. Obviously, it's his stuff, but I think that's one of the things that really adds to the depth of the game is when you can keep the art style similar across the board. Your page or your Discord channel rather introduced me to an app called Dungeon Alchemist, where you can drag and drop on a tile setting and it'll auto populate a room in different settings. So it's got like a mansion, a tavern, a dungeon, and it will make it to where you can import it into Roll20 on a map. So you can really customize stuff. I've been running Candlekeep Mysteries recently, and between getting maps from other people who have Patreons,
I was going to say, you've been running Candlekeep on virtual. That had some not great maps with it.
They're awful.
Yeah.
Every one of them are terrible. It's really disappointing because, Mike Schley, I think, is the guy who does most of the maps for D&D, or Wizards of the Coast, rather. And I got to be honest, I mean, he can't charge that much money. I wouldn't imagine to have his artwork in there that they're like, screw you, we're not going to use your artwork. I don't know.
Also,
and there's got to be... Sorry, you first.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm really pissed at Journeys to the Radiant Citadel because they do have... It's the same duo that did Princes, Mike Schley and Sean McDonald, and they have great map art, and none of it is in color. And I'm like...
Yeah.
Why can't we just spring a little bit more? You're Wizards of the fucking Coast. Like, I know D&D 5e is doing pretty well. Like, can we not spring for color on these maps? Because, come on, so many people are using virtual tabletops.
So between Patreon, being able to have people who use like Incarnate, which I don't have a lot of experience with, but being able to customize those things. And like I said, the Dungeon Alchemist, I spent probably an hour trying to make my own map and use the same dimensions as the map that was in the thing, and it came out really well, I felt. But then I found one that was on Patreon that somebody did way better than I could, and so I used that instead. But yeah, the customization of Roll20, and I assume at that point other virtual tabletops. I think that's the one thing that I haven't heard much is do any of you use other virtual tabletops than Roll20, or does everybody basically use Roll20?
I have run a one-shot in Foundry, and I think I'm going to try my next campaign in Foundry. I liked it. It's still in like early access, so it's not very stable, but I liked some of the bells and whistles. It's really simple, but I really like their door system where players can
Right.
click a door and it
Yeah.
opens, and then you can click it to lock it as the DM. They also have like some invisible walls so that players can if you set up like a trap that you want your players to stop at while they're moving their tokens, they can't go past it. There's a bunch of other things I kind of only dipped my toe in during the one shot, but I want to try out my next campaign on another VTT.
I play in a 3-5 game in Fantasy Grounds.
Okay.
Oh, how's Fantasy Grounds? That's the other. I think that was the other big one for a while.
Yeah, I think it's like number 2 to Roll20.
Yeah. That's
They
on
try.
Steam, right?
I just log in through a URL on a web browser. But from a player's perspective, it's okay. And once again, I'm playing 3.5 rules, which I don't claim to be an expert on. I think Roll20 is for what we're doing. It's the only way you can play 3.5. With scripted stuff. But so in that regards, if you want to play older rules, Fantasy Grounds might work for you. But if you're trying to play 5e, I think Roll20's got a beat right now.
And Fantasy Grounds is only D&D, or does it do different?
Oh, it's all kinds of different tabletop stuff.
Yeah, Foundry I think is one of the new hotnesses. So that's how
Shard.
How easy is Foundry? Like I feel intimidated because Roll20 is kind of the easy user experience one, and I still struggle with using a lot of the Roll20 stuff. But maybe it's just that I would find a different system more intuitive. But I don't know. I've been using Roll20 for literally, oh my god, 7 years or something now. Like it would feel really weird to change, and yet I probably don't get everything out of Roll20 that I should be getting right now in terms of using all the fancy bells and whistles. But I also don't, and I don't do a lot of that stuff. But I wonder how much of that would improve the games versus take time away from the story prep side of it versus the presentation prep side of it. That's always the big
and
debate.
I think that's why like people watch like your stream, right? People watch your stream to see. I can't speak for everybody. I started watching your stream to see how you plan for it and then how it goes, and then listen to you talk about it a little bit the next time, because I think it's helpful as a DM to see how other people experience the, oh crap, I didn't think about this scenario. And then as you build things, like it's been interesting to watch you do the stuff with Rhyme and the thing with the most recent fight, because of how excited you were for them to come across it. The little nuances and the customization to the story that you made for your players, right? It's not so much for us watching. It's not for, it's a little bit for the story you want to tell, but it seems to be more for the story you want to tell for your players. And when you start to get into the nitty gritty parts of like my lights flicker on my map now, I think sometimes it gets away from the story you can tell for them.
Yeah, it's kind of the balance I see is that there's some stuff I want to do better about, and a lot of the stuff I want to do better at is stuff that saves me time. So like macros is a good example of that. There's a lot of really great macros where you can just press a button and then a thing happens. Like that's really good, and I'm glad that I've finally started developing some of those. Or in some cases fundamentally change the game, like the individual initiative system is huge. We've never done that in D&D before. And that's technically, I think, a variant rule of D&D is to have all the monsters roll initiative separately. And that's not something I don't think... I don't even know how... The few times I've run D&D as a DM, I think I did do individual initiative, and it was a hassle trying to keep track of everything. Like initiative in general and the turn order, like all of that I found, like I was just scrambling. I was like, I need my tracker, I need my thing to automatically keep track of the turns and numbers and have just a button to push, everybody roll it. I don't have to do all the calculations. I was just very flustered, and initiative was one of those things that flustered me. We are nearing the end of our time, so how about we go around the room and talk about our final thoughts about using a virtual tabletop experience and how that has, or how that experience changes perhaps the way we play or engage with virtual or with tabletop RPGs. I'm going to go in reverse order this time. Stan, you get to go first.
In times of necessity, if you're trying to play with groups over distance or during COVID lockdowns, it can meet it, but I'd much prefer playing around the table where you can read the room and have that social engagement, and it's less tempting for people to check out.
Pegleg, give me your final thoughts on the virtual tabletop.
I love it for an organizational tool and presentation. The only con is that you don't get to roll dice, which rolling dice is like half the fun for in person.
At least half the fun. I don't disagree. Lumpy, final thoughts on virtual tabletop.
I think they're really the way to go nowadays. If you can play in person, I really like the idea of the hybrid thing, and I'm going to definitely try it when I go visit friends next time, because the organization is great, the presentation is great, and I love dynamic lighting. I just have to say it.
It is nice that, at least in Roll20's case, like anybody can, I think, run that on any kind of laptop at this point, which is certainly an advantage. Genocider, closing thoughts on virtual tabletop.
Yeah, you remember back in the day when you had to cover up your map with pieces of construction paper so the players couldn't see where they're going?
Awkward.
Yeah, yeah. So I really like the virtual tabletop. I think it's great for the long distance stuff. My preferred system would probably be a hybrid game like Dory's, where you have all those tools available, but you're still in the room with people having fun.
Hmm. Speaking of Dory, final thoughts on virtual tabletops?
I am 100% a fan of hybrid. I think that being in a room together just gives you an aspect of the game that you can't get if you can't see each other. And I think the other side of that coin is it does allow for a little bit more theater of the mind versus being strictly online. I love the tools. I mean, the geek in me, I'll sit and write appies and macros until my my time is, up. I'm ready for bed. And Corey's going, what appy are you writing now? Like, what script are you writing? I'm like, oh, wait, do you see this? And and stuff. But I really love the fact that you can see the reactions. So I don't know, maybe in my rhyme campaign, I will put feelers out about doing video and see what everybody says. But I'm not holding my breath on that one.
Yeah, I will say I would not plan an online. I mean, individual people could choose not to have their webcam on, but I would strongly encourage folks to have their webcam on, to the point where I'm almost like, is this something that you want to do? Because this is a social, interactive gameplay experience. So I feel very strongly about the fact that I think people, I get that everybody's going to have their own personal boundaries and hangups about that. And especially if you're playing with randoms, I totally get that. And maybe if you even want to start off, I don't know, these people from anybody, I don't want to show myself to that. I get that too. But if you are playing with established people that or, people you've met before and have it, then gosh, I think webcams is a must for online play for sure. Christopher, final thoughts on virtual tabletop?
Yeah, I think like many other facets of life, we're never going to be able to unplug again. Roll 20 has made it to where so much of this is done, and the closest we're going to get are hybrids. Whether even if you're in person with maps and minis, they might now have their character sheets in on an iPad on
D&D
D&D Beyond,
Beyond.
right?
Yeah, yep.
Doing that, and I see that at being used at game conventions and everything else. And with start playing games and the connections between DMs and making it so easy to find games, I don't know that we'll be able to unplug again. I do know that there's D&D night at my local game store, but I don't know. I don't see. I don't see VTTs going away anytime soon, and just more incorporate them being incorporated more and more into all of our games.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it's definitely here to stay. I think Wizards has smartly embraced that with 5th edition, through D&D Beyond and through allowing licenses for people to purchase official modules in virtual tabletops, and then I believe recently, like the DM's Guild, which is their kind of licensing to write content for D&D, is now partnering with the Roll20. So now you can get all that stuff on there. So it's it's been baby steps for them, but I think they are realizing pretty quickly, and obviously we have the rise of stuff like Critical Role and everything that has woken everybody up to this concept of being able to play D&D and as an entertainment venue for folks like me that do it on YouTube, but also just for everybody to be able to join in online and play. And thankfully that is being embraced, and I think that will be just more and more of that. I agree. I think it's going to be a part of it.
Surprise WotC has not backed a VTT yet.
That's right. Yeah, that's a really interesting a topic. We could do a lot of theory crafting on that. Maybe they're still going after Roll20. Roll20 still has the biggest market share. I would be very curious to know what those kind of business meetings are like if they're trying to look at creating their own system and say, man, we can just launch our own. Maybe they'd want to wait until they do like a 6th edition and be like, look, here's our 6th edition. It's fully integrated into our own virtual tabletop system. That way everybody automatically gets all their stuff. All your stuff's in the cloud. Like, that could be really interesting. Or maybe they're going to do this and just kind of like slowly adapt and absorb, something like Roll20 and just maybe even purchase them outright. Although then Roll20, they obviously can do everything, all the other RPG systems. So I think that is a really interesting topic to ponder about. Brandon, closing thoughts on virtual tabletop.
I'm not sure I can add too much that everybody hasn't already said. In-game or in-person games have an energy that's hard to replicate, but the ability to play in your pajamas at a time that's convenient for you with your friends allows you to play more consistently. And I think at the end of the day, everybody who enjoys playing the game would like to be able to play more often. So instead of having to work around schedules as much, it gives you the chance to do so, along with all the other quality of life tools.
It's funny how D&D has become the online thing for me and my friends, to where when we get together physically, we don't even think about playing D&D. Instead, we'll play board games. We'll play a lot of board games. I mean, those of you who have seen my webcam during the day, I've got a giant board game shelf behind, big Kallax shelf full of games. I'm a big board game fan. And yet, it's weird that the playing D&D has become synonymous with us playing online every week, to where it's almost like, well, why'd we do that? We already do that every week. Yeah, it's become such a strange, and in a lot of ways, virtual tabletop has just changed my life to where I'm leaning more and more towards doing this as, initially it was a hobby, and then it became a part-time job, and now it's practically a full-time job for me, which is a whole different barrel when you look at when I'm doing that during the day as my work day thing, then how much do I want to do that, during my actual free time? So that's a separate issue entirely. But the virtual tabletop, it has become such an important part of my life, and it's been an important part of my life for so long. What started out as an excuse to hang with friends has now just rekindled an entire interest in D&D as an adult that I didn't really have growing up. I didn't have the nostalgia for it. I've met so many wonderful people, all of you. We've just built this community that has been just a huge sense of joy for me, and it's been just an awesome experience, and I certainly don't plan on going anywhere. And what Christopher said, I do think that it is pretty much the way of the future, even if people want to play with a hybrid system, which also is really cool, because I think that would help solve my trepidations with playing physically, that I'm such a bumbling fool with playing without my computer stuff. I could just play with the computer stuff and still sit around the table and roll the dice. I think that's actually a really good solution. All right, I think that will do it for this excellent DM roundtable. Thank you so much to Brandon, Christopher, Dory, Genocider, Lumpy, Lucas, Pegleg, Smitty, and Stan for joining me for this month's DM Roundtable. And thank you to all my patrons. Shoutouts to Platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Thomas, Adam, Stan, William, I'm Allowed, Brandon, Genocider, David Eclectic, Role Player Roll, Christopher, Dig Dug DM, and Brian. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Fassica, Tortoise, Scott, Humanoid, Sized, Sphincters, and Stephanie. Thank you all very much for your support, and hope to see you all again for next month's DM Roundtable.
Thanks for the conversation.
Bye.
That was awesome.